Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to week 14 of an introduction to agent-based modeling. Let me check out those things on mute. Yeah, looks like I do. Okay, so this is the last week. This is my last time to chat with you guys, right? And so basically, the whole goal for this week is to make sure everything's wrapped up properly. Make sure that you've got you getting your exams in, doing all the evaluations, everything like that, right? So that's really what I kind of want to reiterate with all of you, right? I got a couple of questions that have come up that we're going to talk about as well, right? But really, just before I go on too much to those other questions, let me just mention again that you have that the check the dates, get everything right. Okay, right. So you have until September 7th, right? Let me double check this to do all of your exams, right? Don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I know we kind of messed it up a couple times last time. Yep. So September 7th, midnight. Yeah, September 7th, midnight West Coast time, right, is the last day. It shows up as September 8th. Yeah, September 7th, midnight West Coast time. Shows up as September 8th on a lot of things because it's actually at like 2 in the morning in a lot of time zones, or 3 or 4 or whatever, right? So it's September 7th at midnight West Coast time is the last time of the exam, or the last time you can turn in all your exams and everything like that, okay? So hopefully you're working through everything. At that time, by the way, just for those who've never been through the Complexity Explorer experiment, the forums will essentially go dead at that time. So if there's any content you want, if there's any people you want to talk to after September 7th at midnight, make sure that you've exchanged your proper information ahead of time, right? And so that you can reach out separately. The the other couple of comments are just to make sure that you've done all the proper the different course evaluations. So there is the Complexity Explorer main one, which will show up as you're going through, and there's a course evaluation. There is the one that's specifically for the agent-based modeling course, which is going to show up in your lecture notes. Specifically, if you look at Unit 9.6, there's a one on course feedback, and that one is specifically oriented towards agent-based modeling in particular. And then if you did enjoy the course and you want to be nice and help us find more people like you who would be interested in taking this course, then I highly recommend you also fill out a review on ClassCentral.com, which is essentially the Yelp for MOOCs, or TripAdvisor for MOOCs, depending on what your favorite trip advisory toolkit is. So please go ahead and do that as well. So those are the major announcements, right? Do the exams, fill out the evaluations. That's what you need to do before September 7th, midnight, West Coast time, right? Okay. Now, let's get to some questions from the mailbag, if you will. So there was one question in particular that seemed to dominate a lot of discussion forum this week that I want to chat about, and that was about this question about when to use globals and when not to, right? Now, somewhat this is there's no strict hard and fast rules, right, about when to use globals and when not to. In general, it is worth making your code as modular as possible, right? And what we mean by that is that the code will be able to, that you'll be able to take your code, pull it apart, and put it into other pieces of code without having to worry about what's all around it. So if you have a global variable that you're continuing to update throughout your code in different procedures, right, then in order to really get that piece of code working again in another model, you would also have to create that global variable. And you say, that might not be that bad. But what you don't think about is the fact that anything else that changes that global variable, you'd also have to think about adding in, right? And so as a result of this, it's important to realize that when you use a local variable or a passed-in variable, right, if you need something passed in, that can increase the modularity of your code and make it more likely that you can reuse that code in other sections, right? So that would be the biggest argument that I would make for using local versus a global variable. Now, occasionally you need a global variable. Let me give you a concrete example. So if you are running a behavior space experiment and you want a certain set of data to be reported, one easy way to do that is just create a global variable and just make sure that that data is in that global variable. Now, you could also create a reporter function, which would be, in some ways, a better way to do that, right? But one easy way to do it is create a global variable. So there were some questions about creating procedures of inputs and using TubeReport. And so let me just walk you through a couple of examples of that. This may be a little easy for some of you, but it might help out some people who are having some troubles, right? So let's imagine that I have a group of individuals, right, in my model, and let's go with a this is actually a model I kind of have been working on. So let's go with a wealth model of some sort, right? So we're going to create a bunch of people first of all. Let me put on this window so you can see it. Right here. Okay. I'll turn off my background window so you can see that. All right, so I'm going to create a bunch of people in my model. Create 100, set x, y, random, x core, random, y core, set shape, person, set color, blue. Clear all. Okay. So let's say we have a simple procedure, and this is kind of something simple, similar to the wealth distribution model we looked at earlier, where let's say I form links with anyone whose wealth is within a certain threshold of mine, right? And so let's begin by just giving the turtles wealth. So wealth. Set wealth. And we'll give them some simple way to earn wealth, right? So set wealth plus random 10 minus 5. Right? So this is just kind of sometimes you lose wealth, sometimes you gain wealth every year. Right? It's the basic idea, right? Now, let's say that we have the turtles maintain friendships with, or try and create friendships with one of the other turtles, but only if their wealth, so let's do it this way. So we'll let target be one of the other turtles, right? So we're going to try and create a friendship with this one of the turtles. Ask, and we'll make things. We'll let my wealth be wealth, and then we'll ask target if wealth minus my wealth is less than, say, threshold. And this is where we're going to get into what's going on, right? Then create link if. Now we'll let me be self. Create link with me, right? I could have done create link with myself, which is actually the variable, but just to make it very obvious to everyone, because sometimes myself itself can be confusing. I'm gonna do it this way. Oh, and I have to put all this in another turtles. Right. So the general goal here is that as long as the differences, the absolute value and differences between my wealth and this other turtle's wealth is less than some threshold, then I'm going to create a link with that turtle, right? And then we can also say we could have them be deleted as well, right, based upon the same threshold, right? But this kind of will give us some idea of kind of the how, and maybe for now we'll just have ask turtles ask one of my links die. So we won't put a strong rule on that. We'll just have them kill off one of their links every now and then. And because the way this is, that's going to actually kill off more. So let's have it do it probabilistically. If random 10 equals is less than 2, right? There we go. Okay. So let's check to make sure this works. So nothing named threshold is defined. So this is what I'm actually gonna. So I'm actually gonna move all of this code into a separate procedure, separate report, or a separate procedure, right? So I'm gonna call it to create links, right? And I'm just gonna move this whole code right here into that reporter, into that procedure. Sorry. And what I'm doing basically is I'm going to set up an example. I could have had this all written out ahead of time, but decided it would be better for you to see what I was doing. This is all going to be an example of how you could create threshold, how you could pass in a variable or make it useful, right? So whether or not you want to do a global. So one thing I could do, so threshold hasn't been defined, right? So one thing I could do is make threshold a slider, right? And when I make threshold a slider, right, and let me add the buttons in for setup and go real quick. Oh, a turtle cannot create links with itself. That's interesting. Target is one of other turtles. That's what's causing the problem. Okay. The setup. Oh, ask space. Oh. If any my links. Right. Okay. So what is this code doing? Well, this code is essentially, and I'll put this up on the web so that people can look at it, so that everybody can look at it afterwards. But what this code is doing is it is essentially creating links with Turtle whose wealth is within some threshold about my wealth, right? And right now it's essentially using a global, right? Because that global is actually this. Any slider, any green thing in the NetLogo interfaces tab, slider, switch, chooser, and input is a global variable. So it can be accessed like a global variable. So we could, in fact, remove this one. It's going to give me some problems, say nothing named threshold has been defined. But we could then go up and say globals threshold, right? And then we could, in the setup procedure, do set threshold 50. Okay. So if we did this, we get similar patterns of behavior, right? Now this, so this is using a global now as our variable, right? But what if we, like I said, so the next question comes, well, what if we want to instead make create links be more modular? The problem with this code right now is if I were to cut and paste this particular procedure into any other code, it wouldn't work because it would say that nothing named threshold has been defined. But what I could do is say create links threshold and pass threshold in, and then just, and usually you like to give it a slightly different name, so let's call it fresh, right? So then I'm going to say that thresh is actually a parameter, it's an input to the create links procedure and gets input there, right? And one of the nice things about that, right, is I could also start to do more interesting things like give different turtles different thresholds. Maybe some turtles will form links with anyone, right? And some turtles will only form links with very specific people, right? So I could, in fact, give the turtles their own individual thresholds. Set my threshold random, say 50. Then all we have to do to change this code is just to pass in create links my threshold with set threshold, right? And now we get kind of a slightly different behavior, right? So you see some more interesting things going on because now everyone has slightly different thresholds, right? And so again, having things be local is usually a good idea because it allows you things like this, right? It allows more heterogeneity in the system often. Now, the last question that came about was what about reporting it, right, back, right? So what if, for instance, we actually wanted, let's say we wanted the threshold to actually change over time. So that if individual turtles created links, then the threshold would remain constant, but if they didn't, they widen their threshold, right? So the idea being that if I can find friends within my threshold, that's good, but if not, I'm willing to kind of look for more people. So what we could do is actually change create links into be a reporter. So we'll just say to report, create links thresh. And right now, and so we'll create let return value be thresh for now, right? And a lot of times you'll see, I don't know, this is a little bit old school of me. I tend to write out that whatever I'm returning is R value or R val. You'll see sometimes, right, for short for return value. So essentially, we can say that if you're able to create the link, then we're going to leave it alone. But else, what we're going to do is we're going to actually increase the threshold, right? So set the thresh to thresh plus 1, right? Meaning that now we are allowing slightly more people to be in there, right? And then the thing to actually make it report that is we actually have to end the statement with the word report, and then whatever that thing. Oh, sorry, it's the R value, not the actual thresh. So, because by the way, if we modify the threshold value inside of this procedure, it doesn't get passed back automatically. So we have to modify it within the procedure and then pass it back. And so now, if we do this, right, you'll see that we get these very kind of much denser graphs over time, right? Because all of the agents are actually adapting their thresholds to make sure that they can always, whenever possible, create new links. And so the only thing, in fact, we can try and figure out, like, so we can look to see my threshold of turtles, right? So many of them are very high. In fact, you know, very large thresholds, whereas we hit setup and we see what they originally they're very low. Some of them at 0, right? Meaning they won't create friendships with anyone, right? But even after only a few ticks, right, the values have all gone up quite a bit, right? And one way you could look at that, right, you could show that a little bit better by saying need my threshold of turtles. So after a while, it's 84. Well, we know that we set it randomly to 50 at first, so that should mean that initially it's going to be around 25, because that's half of 50. And in fact, it's 21 in this run. And then after a few ticks, it becomes 93, right? So I hope this was this kind of weird one example, right? Maybe this is a little bit different than some of the examples you've looked at in the past, but I thought it was at least related enough to some of our, like, well, distribution models that may be interesting. And what we're showing is, like, when you want to use a global variable, right? When you want to use a local variable that's being passed in, and when you want to use a reporter to actually modify and update that value to pass it back out. So I will put this example model up on the discussion forum, so you can look for a link for it there. Let me just save it off real quick while I'm thinking of it. I'll call it the threshold model, just because that's what we're playing around with. But hopefully that gives you some understanding of when to use local variables, when to use global, and so forth. Okay? So let me turn back on the laptop camera. Get a little bit more. So that was the major discussion I had to go over today. Most of the other things we've kind of covered at some point in the past. But let me quickly check to see if there's anything else going on. There were a couple questions about people who think they got bad reviews or people who hadn't paid attention, right? If you really think that is the case, feel free to email us and let us know, and we'll take a look at that. So the September 7th, 11:59 Pacific Daylight Time, by the way, one of the things about it, there was another discussion about when the close of the peer reviews is. It should actually, the website should now be showing in your local time, whatever that is. So hopefully once you go there, you'll see it. By the way, I also want to thank everyone who's been contributing to the Modeling Commons and adding the models that they put up there. Gabby has been doing a good job of trying to collect them all and making sure that we can't get them. That they're all collected and taking a look at. By the way, I did have a follow-up. I looked into this came up a couple times about using system dynamics modeling in level space. I did, by the way, follow that up with the actual developers of Level Space, and it turns out we're absolutely right. It does not work right now. However, they think it's going to be easy to fix. What I did, by the way, to do this was I actually filed a bug report on GitHub for NetLogo. And let me just show you guys, by the way, for those of you who don't know, NetLogo is freely available. The original source code is available on GitHub. And you can go on there, and if you're, I don't want you to report a bug just because you think you found a bug. Like, make sure you've got a bug that you can document pretty well. But if you can, right, then you can actually file a bug on GitHub about NetLogo. So let me pull this up real quick. Okay, yeah. So here is the NetLogo GitHub repository. So it's at github.com/netlogo, right? So if you go there, if you want, by the way, if you want to also just download the NetLogo source code, you can grab it from here and download it and play around with it. It is open, completely available. However, you can also do things like file an issue. So what I did actually, and you can see it for yourself, right? I went in after I was confident. So what I did was when I saw that Level Space couldn't open System Dynamics Model, I double-checked and I documented. What you want to do is you want to document the steps that result in the error. Make sure that you can always recreate the same steps, right? So I basically went through and I figured out what the steps were, and then I documented them. And then I went to the Level Space extension on NetLogo on GitHub, right? I went to the Issues tab, right? And I filed this particular NetLogo issue, right? I said in the MOOC, someone asked me about using Level Space. I didn't expect it to work, but it seemed to fail in a weird way to reproduce. I opened the parent model example. I click Setup and Create Child, choose WebSheet Creation, right? I then looked to see that the models object, which is the object that contains pointers to all the different submodels that you have, is 0, which is kind of weird. But you can still edit the WebSheet predation system dynamics model, which seems weird. So I said it either shouldn't load at all and present an error message or load correctly. And one of the developers got back right away and basically said, good catch. I think I can probably make it work. I'm not sure. You can definitely see how getting it to work would be useful. Hybrid modes would be common among those doing multi-log. If I can't get it to work, then I'll make sure the errors clearly and documented appropriately. So again, if you found a bug and you are confident you can reproduce it and it doesn't work the way it should, right, then I encourage you to file an issue with NetLogo or Level Space or whatever's appropriate, right? But don't do it just because you one time your system glitches and does something weird. Make sure you can reproduce the bug. Otherwise, there's not much point in sending it up there, okay? So, anyways, turn off that. Okay, not bad. Okay, so that is about it. So there's been a couple other questions about the course close certificates and the course closing. Um, as soon as the course closes, you should all receive your certificates. If you do not, then please email us and we'll look into it, right? But basically the way the course is set up is it doesn't send out the certificates until until the course is actually done, right? In this course, you can't really lose points, but I guess it's potentially possible that you could in other courses. So that's probably the reason why it's set up the way it is. Yeah, I think that's about it. If there are any other questions, please send them to me. This has been a great course, right? And I've really enjoyed having all of you involved, that's for sure. So let me know if let me know how you've enjoyed the course. Let me know if you have any other questions, right? Let me know if there's anything we can do to improve the course, right? We're always looking for ways to improve. For those of you who maybe are watching this, but for some reason didn't complete this course this time, or if you're just really passionate about NetLogo and nature-based modeling and want to do it again, we do plan on offering the course again next summer, all else being equal, right? So hopefully that will also work as an option. Again, wrapping up, September 7th coming up shortly here, 2 days. By midnight, you have to have all the exams done that you want to get done, right, in order to complete the certificate. You need to have a 70% grade on average on all the materials in order to get the certificate, which means that if you kind of miss one exam, you should still be okay because there's more than enough grades to do that. But assuming you did really well on all the other ones, right? So please go through and fill out as many as you can. And then finally, please fill out the evaluations that we've asked you for. Right? If you have any other questions, ways we can make the course better, everything like that, please let me know. And yeah, hope this has been enjoyable. And one last thing. A couple people last year, they've now actually taken their models that they put together for this course, and they've either published them or they presented them on the conferences or they've used them in their work or something like that. And I love it when I get emails back about the fact that that people are actually putting into practice what they learned in this course. So if any of those things applies to you, then definitely shoot me an email. Let me know what you did. Okay. Thanks everybody. I look forward to seeing you in about a year. Probably won't be the same people, but I look forward to talking to you regardless. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.